All right. Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our second in our series around Arc-enabled infrastructure. For those that missed, we had one on Friday to set the stage and show kind of that foundation for Arc-enabled infrastructure, how to get started. Today, we're going to be building upon that discussion, focusing around leveraging some of the additional capabilities that you get once you Arc-enable your infrastructure. So we've got Adam Turner and Mark Hoyland helping us out again today, leading us through this. And Adam's promised that we're going to have lots of fun demos and getting into the tools today. So look forward to that. Note the session will be recorded. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A capability within Teams. Again, at any point, feel free to drop that in and we will try and either answer it live or put some more information in the Q&A. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to both Adam and Mark. And thank you again for attending today.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. So as Kelly mentioned, my name is Adam Turner. I'm a Principal Technical Specialist for Microsoft side of Azure West Midwest. I'm also joined by Mark. Mark, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, Mark Hoyland, also Azure Technical Specialist focused on infrastructure services. Nice to see everyone.
All right. So if you joined us last time, I just want to do a quick recap. What we really spent most of the time on was Arc enablement, as well as talking about the upcoming end of support for Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2 is coming up on October 10th, 2023. As we walked through this last time, we talked about some of the options that were available, whether that be to modernize on Azure by moving to platform services that sort of remove that need for managing server versions inside of your infrastructure pretty much permanently by staying on evergreen versions of platform services provided by Microsoft on Azure. Option 2 was migrating those virtual machines into Azure, where you could get up to 3 years of additional extended security updates at no cost. So migrate your virtual machines to Azure, free ESUs for the next 3 years, which is a good benefit. And the other option that we spoke about at length last time was the ability to deploy extended security updates through Arc connected machines for the scenarios where you have workloads that really can't move right now. Like there's no scenario where you could get them to Azure that quickly. They have to stay where they are. But you'd like to instead take advantage of the monthly billing model provided by Azure, where you can enable your Arc machines to download those MAC keys and have the entitlement necessary to install and to download and install those extended security updates on those machines, regardless of where they're located, provided that they have, meet one of 3 criteria: that they have software assurance, they have a SPLA license, or they have a CSP license. So those were those 3 scenarios. And we'll draw a box around that one. That was one we really focused on last time. So that recording is still available if you'd like to go back and take a look at that. But
the
one of the
that I did want to add that we forgot to mention last time is for those that do have a Mac commitment, this is something that can help draw down your Mac. So I did want to throw that benefit in there as another additional thing that I think we forgot to mention last time, but wanted to add it in today. So sorry, go ahead, Adam.
No, thank you. No, that's good to know. The areas that we kind of touched briefly on last time, we're trying to extend some of the capabilities and the landscape that you can view by Arc enabling all of your machines. It's not just for ESU delivery. There's other benefits to Arc enabling your machine, such as being able to monitor and update your hybrid/multi-cloud infrastructure regardless of where it's located. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on today, is drilling in on some of those benefits and showing some scenarios that allow you to understand how hybrid doing Arc enablement and connecting to Azure Monitor, Azure Update Manager is a tremendous advantage, and uses all similar tooling that you're already familiar with as an Azure customer. So as an Azure customer, you're familiar with a lot of these experiences, things like using the Azure portal, using PowerShell, using CLI, using APIs. And on top of that, you also have a set of other existing tools you use to manage things natively, like Kubernetes tools, server admin tools, other things inside of your environment. And this can be consistent using Azure Arc. So your Arc-enabled infrastructure can take advantage of all of those same capabilities, all those same scenarios that you're used to managing, and have sort of this blanket coverage using services that cover all of your Azure infrastructure to date that you're already familiar with, things like Azure Monitor, Microsoft Sentinel, Defender for Cloud. All those things that you're used to can be applied against Azure Arc infrastructure, because when you hybrid connect your Azure Arc infrastructure into Azure, that is projected into Azure as a first-class citizen, meaning that it is something that's going to appear inside of Azure Resource Manager like anything else located inside of Azure, right? It's going to exist inside of a subscription, inside of a resource group, have role-based access control applied to it. It's going to allow you to organize and inventory all of those things, just like you would with any other piece of infrastructure inside of Azure. So being able to search, index, group on, tag that hybrid infrastructure so that you can identify it, as belonging to a business unit or a specific application or something like that, right? All that's something that you can do with Azure Arc. The ability to build environment and automate some of these capabilities through templates and extensions is something else that's very cool and specific to Azure Arc and the connected agent extension framework that's applied. And finally, like as we think about like the overall management and security capabilities that are provided inside of Azure, we think about like how we govern and check for internal compliance against all of our resources. So using things like looking at log information, as well as how we're applying Azure policy at scale across our environment. Using Azure Arc allows you to do that in a way from a central control point inside of Azure that would be really difficult to achieve otherwise, and all enabled by Azure Arc, regardless of where these things are hosted, whether these are on premises inside of some sort of host service provider environment or within a Microsoft competing cloud. So we're going to talk about two different scenarios today around Arc-enabled infrastructure and monitoring. One is Arc-enabled servers. So again, this ability to organize, inventory, and monitor your Arc-enabled servers, apply security governance principles to them. And regardless of what they might be, whether these are physical machines, these are virtual machines, they might be Windows or running some distribution of Linux that's supported by the Arc agent. All of these are things that can be lumped into Azure Arc and viewed under that consistent set of tooling. The other thing that we're going to touch on briefly today is this idea of Arc-enabled Kubernetes. So the same principles that you have for servers here could also be enabled against all of your Kubernetes clusters that might be hosted in a variety of disparate locations, right? So the ability to organize, inventory, and monitor not one, but maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of different clusters across a multitude of different environments, and be able to apply security governance principles to those, or for mass deployment and standardization scenarios, like how you use GitOps-based methodologies to deploy to all those environments without needing to log in and deploy each single one. This is a really, really cool capability provided by Azure Arc, as well as the ability to do secure access with Cluster Connect. That is having that central control point to manage all of your Kubernetes environments is super slick. So I want to talk a little bit about Azure Monitor, which is really, really going to be the focus of most of this. And I promise we're not going to be super slide heavy. We're going to go through a couple, and then a lot of this is going to be demo. So if you're familiar with Azure Monitor, or maybe you're not familiar with Azure Monitor, there are a number of experiences to drive a consistent approach to monitoring infrastructure inside of Azure. We think about this at multiple levels. We think about how things are monitored at an application perspective. We think about how we monitor things through infrastructure using native monitoring agents with Windows or Linux support, sort of like workload agnostic monitoring. And then we think about like some of the zero instrumentation scenarios, like how logs and metrics get pumped into Azure without you really doing anything. Like I can look at a VM and find metrics from just the last 30 days of metrics running on a virtual machine and see that. And I didn't instrument anything. I'm just running inside of Azure. These are some of the benefits that you're getting by Azure Monitor. And then we think about like all the enhanced experiences that are provided through some of the insights components inside of Azure Monitor. So application insights, container insights, VM insights, network insights. These are all insight capabilities where, some sort of agent is pushing this information into a log analytics workspace for retention and analysis. And by doing this, this allows you to visualize some of these capabilities through dashboards, through Power BI, through monitor workbooks, and perform analysis against these data sources and these resources, so that you can start to understand like what are those error scenarios and what are the things that are happening that you need to know about, and allow you to generate an alert and response strategy around your workload, right? Like, so when all my CPU percentages are ramping up around 99% and they've been sitting there for 30 minutes, I probably need to start sending some emails. I might want to integrate and perform some sort of action. Maybe I want to hit a webhook and notify somebody that something is happening. Maybe that will generate an infrastructure operation. Maybe I just want to generate a ticket in my downstream ticketing system and perform, like let that system be responsible for doing any sort of pager duty or sort of thing that might come into to that response scenario. But again, all of this is something that can be encompassed, built around either your normal Azure infrastructure, but also Azure Arc enabled infrastructure. Neat thing about this, as I was mentioning earlier, is this idea around extensions. So rather than forcing you to enable, Azure Monitor Agent, things like that, on your guest machines, this capability to deliver these agents that are required for integration with Azure Monitor through extension frameworks of the existing connected machine agent inside of Azure Arc. So you can see, and there's two different flavors that are represented here. There's the VM extensions, so that's this one up here on the top, and then you have this one down here, which is Kubernetes Azure Arc, where these are delivered as cluster extensions on Kubernetes. So a couple extensions got pushed in here through the Azure Connected Machine Agent. Ignore the Microsoft Monitoring Agent one. That one's not relevant here. We want to focus on the two that are important, which are the Azure Monitor Windows Agent, Dependency Agent for Windows. We'll show this in a little bit more detail later. But rather than forcing you to install this got delivered through the Arc Connected Machine Agent and configured on that base machine through Azure Arc. Same thing with the Kubernetes, right? The cluster extension deployed a couple things on here. So Azure Monitor for containers, that container insights capability, Open Service Mesh got pushed on, and Policy Insights all got pushed on as cluster extensions. So again, regardless of where these are located, no direct configuring of those servers, all enabled through extension services by virtue of them being Arc connected. And again, these are things that you can control. You determine whether or not these get enabled, as these are value-added services. And by doing this helps you build this idea of being able to do smart and scalable alerting, right? So regardless of where your infrastructure is located, this will allow you to build an alert response mechanism based on real data provided out of Azure Monitor. through the metrics, logs, and visualizations that you're used to working with. Like there's a dashboard right here that shows a bunch of different things in a bunch of disparate locations. Like you could have a server CPU performance for things inside of Azure. You can see a number of clusters down here that are in different places. Like this one is located on-prem, this one is located in GCP, not much happening here. Another cluster located in GCP, and then again, like another cluster that might be located on-prem, like all mashed up into one experience, right? This is like the value added benefit of Arc enablement, is being able to see all these things in one spot, one pane of glass, right? That's the request that you hear a lot. I want one place to look at all of this. When you think about VM Insights, like in a little bit more detail, as I mentioned earlier, like this is where we're configuring through that extension, right? Configuring our agents through the extension and pushing into log analytics, and allow you to really dive in and look at a number of metrics in a number of different ways to determine, what are the metrics that are important to you and that are important to your application. On top of that, sort of forensic exploration of metrics here, the other thing that can be installed through the Azure Monitor agent, that dependency agent, is this, which is this map, right? So the dependency map of what is connecting to your machine and also what your machine is connecting to, right? So if you're someone that is thinking of moving a server up into Azure, maybe you're not at the point where you are ready to do an assessment, but this is something that you can look at just by Arc enabling and sending some information into Azure Monitor. You can build this dependency map and understand what is coming in and out of a specific piece of infrastructure before you go through the full process of doing an actual assessment analysis for migration. Those capabilities are also provided inside of Azure Migrate, but this is something that you can provision as sort of a one-off and see some immediate benefit. Same thing with the Container Insight solution, right? So all the stuff I said about servers is also applicable directly to Arc-enabled Kubernetes Container Insights here. So being able to see across lots of clusters, like you can see here, like they have 25 monitored clusters, 52 unmonitored clusters. So they could enable this on a total of 77 and see 77 clusters with metrics all being generated in one spot, and be able to view that from one place, right? Like that's a massive amount of monitoring, analysis, and alerting capability, all driven through Azure Monitor. Before we dive into this, I want to go into the not slideware portion of this and just kind of show some of these capabilities, right? So this is a Arc connected Kubernetes cluster located in an on-premises location. And just out of the box, by enabling insights through a cluster extension, I can see a number of things inside of monitoring of Container Insights, right? I can see information about the nodes, right? I can see node counts, I can see pod counts. I can come in and look at a number of reports that are related to this, right? So I can see disk capacity, disk IO, and a slew of other reports that just get automatically generated here, as well as some just general health information, right? At scale across all these different clusters that I may be hosting. Like this is only running 2. This isn't particularly super interesting. But I can also see health for all my controllers, right? Again, I'm not going someplace else. I'm just looking at everything through Container Insights here inside of Azure, this Arc connected agent. So I can see controller status. I can also see all the different containers that are running and some metrics that are probably pretty important to me, like how long these have been running, how many restarts I've been having, what node these are located on. Just there's a massive number of containers that are running inside of this one. But that is that. And then I want to flip over and kind of go through container insights really through VM insights. Apologies. Go here. And I'm going to look at Azure Arc. So first thing you'll note here, I'm showing all my Arc machines. I have a number of them. I have 6. And you can see I have all these things installed on them, although I do have this. The monitoring agent is not installed on one of them, so one of these is not eligible. But let me circle back to that in a second. When you come into Insights, I can go to Performance, and again, without any sort of configuration, I didn't generate this report or anything like that. I can see all of this information. I haven't really done anything yet. I have a ton of data that is useful. If I have my dependency map configured correctly, I can see that, I also have this. I can see the processes that are running on my Arc server. I can see what's happening elsewhere. I can see what it's reaching out to. I notice that nothing is calling it because I just stood this up inside of Azure. It's not super important right now. No one's calling it. But I can also see all the different places that it is reaching out to. Again, like thinking about scenarios where you're kind of building that dependency map, right? And if I'm thinking about moving this eventually, or if I'm just troubleshooting a scenario, like what's happening? I noticed that I have this red bar here. So this is telling me that I'm having a problem connecting to a couple addresses. So I know what these are, but I know that I'm having problems, right? Maybe this is something that I should be alerted on, right? So anytime this is an Arc connected server, anytime this is reaching out to something that's important, maybe this is alert criteria, right? It's a pretty neat capability to know that, connections are failing. So let's talk about this one that's not included. I don't have insights on. I could enable it. I could do that, but I don't want to do this for every Arc enabled machine. I would much rather come in and do this via policy. So if I go to Azure Policy, I can enable monitoring at scale across my environment by coming in here, going to definitions, going to go to monitoring specifically. And if I filter this down by Arc, this will give me a list of all the different things I can enable at scale across my Arc estate. But for readability purposes, let's go to the assignments that matter in this scenario. And there's really 3 of them, right? This one, the ability to configure Windows Arc enabled machines to run the Azure Monitor agent. That's one. This one, configure Windows Arc machines to be associated with the data collection rule or data collection endpoint. So I want to talk about this just a minute. So normally when you do this, it just installs the Arc agent, right? With the Azure Monitor agent, creating a data collection rule or specifying a data collection endpoint is super important. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything. Just installing the agent is good enough by itself. But you can see that when I established this assignment, I said, this is the data collection rule I want to go to. Please use that one, right, for this policy assignment. And you can think about this, like depending on what your log analytics configuration looks like and how you're doing policy assignments, maybe those are going to different places. And this is how you can really enable this at scale, is determining how this maps into your existing log analytics workspace architecture and how this can complement it and be a part of it consistent with the rest of your infrastructure that's already in place. And finally, this one, this configuring the dependency agent on Azure Arc enabled servers. So the one key point I would point out here is that there are 2 of these. One just says configure dependency agent on Azure Arc enable Windows Server, and this one says with Azure monitoring agent settings. That's the important part, because if you use the wrong one, it won't work. So as part of that is mostly the log analytics agent getting retired. As you know, that goes away, the policy assignments will get cleaned up over time. Moving back to our friend here. So this is all pretty cool. So I could enable, we can enable across our entire estate, all these different things. And this is all well and good, but right now I'm drilling into each one of these resources in order to get insight information, right? Kind of can be kind of a lengthy experience. I'm gonna hit refresh here. And we'll hit performance. I'll be a little bit more patient this time. One of the things that sort of a underused, overlooked capability is the ability to go in and look at some of these workbooks and pin these to a dashboard. So this is just native Azure capability. So I can take any of these resources that are, or any portion of this workbook and pin it back to a dashboard that is useful. So I have pins on all these different areas where I can pin this individual metric back. So if I pick I can have shared dashboards, I can have private dashboards. But if you're thinking about building a single pane of glass experience, we could come in and we can pin all of these things to a single dashboard. So I'm going to pin this. Let's do one more just for fun. Pin. I can see all my pinning succeeded. And let's look at this one. Oh, that's good. Here. One more time with feeling. I pinned the label, not the let that be a warning to you. There's two different things inside of there. One is the label, one is the actual metric graph formats. Hey, Mark, have you ever pinned the label and not the graph before?
I believe I have.
I think that's something that all of us have done.
Yeah. Probably more than once.
Probably more than once. Yep. So I want to pin this guy. Pin that. Pin that. Let's do two just for demo purposes. And we'll come back here. So I can see this, and I see those two metrics, right? So I see my CPU and I see my memory utilization on these two. So kind of useful, right? But most people don't want to see just single metrics here, right? We'd rather see this deployed across lots of different things. So some of those insights queries are super valuable because you can kind of take those as a starting point and then build something a little bit better, right? So if I go in here, let's go to performance. I'm going to click edit again, and I'm going to edit this section. I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to take this query, and I'm going to create a new workbook. I'm going to add a query, and then I'm going to adjust this a little bit. So let's say this is greater than last 4 hours. let's summarize. I want the average value. So again, this is just a CPU. A CPU visualization, and let's say I want my time grain to be 15 minutes. How about that? And let's say I don't want to do just one. I want to do I want all of my Arc servers to be included here, right? This is going to give me a grid. That's not super helpful. I want a time chart. And now I have something that looks a little bit more valuable, right? This is something that should be familiar. I'm going to save this. I'm going to create my guy here. And then what I want to do is pin this. So basically what I showed here is just this ability to take some of those insights queries that you already have, slight adjustment here with KQL. I'm gonna pin this to a different dashboard where, maybe this has more information across my environment. And now I can see, the start of a dashboard where, I have CPU information, but I'm probably going to add some more stuff on here that's going to be important for me to understand the health topology and, operational insights around the platform that we're currently observing here through a dashboard. So pretty cool capability.
And Adam, as cool as it is to build this all out in the portal, you can do this via code as well for rinsing and repeating the process, correct?
I did. I'm going to show that in a little bit.
Sorry.
That's okay. That is good to know. While we're here, I did want to. It's worth noting that all the workbooks that are generated inside of here. Here, let's hit edit, and then if we click in here, there's two versions. There's either the workbook gallery template or an ARM template, and these are representations, right? That you can just take, cut, and paste, and pull out of here. So like this query, like I could start here, build this out around a certain solution set, and then copy it and replace it and have a completely separate workbook aligned to a completely different workload, but have all the same sort of heuristics and capabilities and charts and representations across that other workload, right? And all I did was take the work that I already did and point it at different resources. Like this is a really cool flexible capability inside of Azure Monitor to quickly generate these operational dashboards. Did I hit all the notes there, Mark? Or is there anything else that you wanted to throw in?
No, I think you hit it all.
Okay.
I think one of the questions that often comes up is just from a pricing perspective. I think we've covered previously that, extending a server that's sitting outside of Azure into the Azure control plane with, the Arc connected machine agent, there's no inherent cost to that. That's free of charge.
Right.
But when you start utilizing these types of capabilities, can you maybe go over, when there are some consumption billing activities going on there?
Yeah. So with Monitor, all the workbooks and things like that, like that's free. You are paying for metrics. In that you are writing all those into a log analytics workspace, and writing into log analytics workspace, you'll be charged log ingress fees. So whatever volume of metrics are being collected here, that's your eventual charge. If we're talking about monitoring specifically.
And then those policies that you're using to deploy these extensions at scale, those would not be included in that additional monthly charge for guest configuration, correct?
That's correct. So that's kind of a sticky point, right? The assignments that I'm making here through Azure Policy, these are not guest configuration policies. These are policies that are applied against the Arc resources that are projected within Azure, not within the guest itself. It's telling this infrastructure to deploy an extension, which is going to install the necessary software to connect back through the Azure Arc connected agent, but it does not count as guest configuration. Guest configuration would be something like adjusting a machine to a security baseline, or ensuring that different roles and services are provided through guest configuration policies within Azure, versus something that's enacted against the actual Azure Resource Manager resource, which is what we're doing here. That is it's sort of a fine difference in terms of how these are enabled.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Sure. That's a great question, and one that comes up often. So now we kind of talked about dashboarding and, kind of seeing that overall operational view of your estate. Wouldn't it be great if I could also look at patch compliance and know, like, how up to date are all of my servers? And what if I could do that from one place? Enter Update Manager. So Update Manager is Update Manager is a new generally available service. So this is a SaaS platform for update management inside of Azure for Windows and Linux updates across hybrid environments. So you can use this for your machines, but you can also use this for all connected machines. This is different from the old update management service that was provided by Azure Automation. Rather than putting everything inside of log analytics and having dependency on an agent, all of this information is projected into Azure Resource Graph and update reports rather than into a log analytics workspace. There are also a number of orchestration options that this opens up to you by allowing Azure Update Manager to push your updates. So you can group machines together, group your applications together, either through specific lists or through dynamic scopes, and we'll show a little bit of that in a couple minutes here. And the other thing that you can do is generate periodical reassessments from Azure Update Manager. So basically telling those machines, go out and let me know how up to date you are. The other really neat thing about Update Manager is this respects the tooling that's installed on the machine. So rather than going and querying against public sources, it's going to look at however you have your update management configured on those individual machines. So if you're using Windows and looking at Windows Update Client, if you're using WSUS in a specific location rather than the public, it will go and look at your WSUS instance. It will not look at public. It will respect the tooling that's applied in the machine. Same thing with Linux. It'll look at the local package manager and determine, based on whatever repos it is connected to, how up to date it is. So that's a pretty neat feature.
Hey, Adam,
Sure.
your audio, it's like it switched devices and you sound a bit far away and not as clear.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Inside of Azure Update Manager, a couple things. So being able to view the available updates within Azure Resource Graph will show all those missing updates severity. Again, we'll go through this in a second. Hot patch is supported, not for Arc VMs. Don't get too excited. This is for Windows Server 22 Azure Edition VMs. The ability to install updates with no reboot required. That's supported through Azure Update Manager, but still a really cool feature worth mentioning. And also this direct update capability. So being able to force update through the management agent for one-off patching. So if there's something super critical and you want to patch now, you don't want to wait for a maintenance schedule to fire, you can do one-off patching provided that you have a sufficient level of permissions against that resource. There's an entire RBAC model that's built around that as well. Finally, update transparency. So being able to see the classification and severity of these, as well as the KBID for each of these, are all posted inside of the data that's projected out into Azure Resource Graph as part of the periodic reassessment functionality. So a lot of information sent to you. You know, what actions you need to take, what the criticality of the situation is, and how that might impact your application as you're pushing it out with that set of updates. I am going to flip now to talk about Update Manager. And let's go in and let's take a look at this. So I can see a bunch of things in here. I'm going to go down to Arc enabled servers, and I can see that I have 6 machines. I have 5 that are pending updates. I have 1 with no update data. Let's take a look at that in a little bit more detail. So it looks like I deployed all of these at the same time, since they all have 3 pending updates. Let's click into one of these just to look at what this looks like. So 3 pending updates. So it looks like I have Defender antivirus that needs to go in. Update for Windows Server 2016 is just an update, and then an update roll up for the malicious software removal kit. So again, like, I can do lots of different things from this one place. I could push a one-time update if I wanted to do that. I can adjust the update settings for this machine. I could go to maintenance configurations and ensure that this happens on an orchestrated schedule. Let's bounce back up real quick and look at this one, because I have one that has no update data. So I have some options here, right? I can come in here and manually do this and update settings. And I can decide that I do want periodic assessments to happen on this. You'll notice that hot patch orchestration aren't applicable to this because this is an Arc server. But maintenance schedules are. Really, when you think about patch orchestration, maintenance schedules are what's going to be your orchestration pattern for the Arc capability. I could do this. Mark, should I enable all of my Arc servers manually?
No, I typically wouldn't recommend that.
I think that's correct. So again, we're going to come back to policy for enabling this. And if we go to our categories, I can go to Update Manager. And you'll notice that I have some policies that are built in, ready to go here, right? Configure periodic checking for missing system updates on Azure Arc enabled servers. And you can see that is assigned across my estate. So the ability to onboard all of these, you'll notice that, you know, the one that's excluded there is in a excluded scope. That's why he didn't get this, but everybody else, all of my Arc servers were onboarded through Azure policy. And by doing this will allow you to generate that periodic assessment on a regular basis and have that whole view across your estate of patch compliance, how up to date things are, and if there are things that are missing that are critical or important that need to be updated, all available data through Azure Resource Graph. So let me pop back here. Come into machines. We showed the pending updates. I want to show maintenance configurations. I'm not going to create one, but I want to walk through this and kind of explain what this looks like. I know we're running out of time here. So I'm going to configure this for Arc-enabled Azure VMs or Arc-enabled VMs, the servers, reboot if required, and I'm going to add a schedule. And I have the capability to do this, right? Like I can pick a date and time. I can pick a length of my maintenance window. And I can determine how often I want this to happen. Maybe I want to do this on a familiar date, like the second Tuesday of every month. And then I also want to establish a scope. So I can build this dynamic scope in a number of ways for applying this maintenance configuration. I'm going to pick my subscription, and then I'm going to build a filter. And I have options. I could pick resources based on resource group. I could pick it based on resource type. Like, let's say I just want to do Arc servers. I can do this based on locations. Maybe I have things that are located in different geographies that I want to target with this maintenance configuration, that I might want to use a separate maintenance configuration for my DR region, right? Do I want to do all my Windows and Linux machines together, or do I want to separate them? And finally, and this one's kind of cool, the ability to create a filter based on tag. Like, I know all of my Arc-enabled servers have this tag applied to them. So I could, based on a tag scenario, I could also build a list of servers that I want to target here. So this is pretty neat capability here. I'm going to trash this and just keep moving forward. I picked just Arc servers, so it'll show you a preview of those machines based on that scope. Here are all the servers that are included. That looks pretty good. I'm going to save. And then you can add specific machines onto this if you want, in addition to the dynamic scopes that are generated, and then determine what kind of updates that you want to apply. Right now, it's just doing critical security updates. I could include other ones. I could include other scenarios that I want to patch through this specific maintenance configuration. I may want to include specific KB IDs or package IDs. I may want to exclude them. These are all things I can do as part of my maintenance configuration. I can also tag my maintenance configuration, because this is something that lives inside of Azure, just like everything else. And then finally, there's like this review and create step that we're all familiar with at this point. So this is all pretty cool, right? But we didn't talk about this part, which are some of those reports that are important to you as someone that wants to know patch compliance and scenarios inside of your infrastructure. So I can see some basic reports inside of here, and don't worry, I'll show you something a little bit cooler in a minute. Have some donut graphs. I can see some updates information. I can view like some of the update status. So scenarios, total machines, updates available, machines where I don't have any update data, so I don't know what my status is on those. And then some pending Windows updates by machine count. So four machines need this update. Some of these like roll-ups that you're thinking about are important as you're sort of looking at your overall patch state for your environment. And this is all kind of neat, right? All this data is surfaced inside of Azure Resource Graph, but it would be cool if maybe I spent some time and built out my own workbook and kind of thought about all the different things that are interesting to me as someone that cares about my infrastructure, right? So maybe I generate my own workbook where I build my own queries to look across all of my infrastructure and determine things like CPU, disk utilization, memory utilization, heartbeat, whether or not these are connected machines are running, but then also see some of this patch assessment information, right? And again, like, this is a workbook. I can edit this. I can hit my pin button. I can pin all of these into here, and for times purposes, I've pinned all of these into something that already exists, and be able to see sort of that single pane of glass experience that I've been trying to get to. Right, I can see all my CPU utilization. I can see all my memory utilization. I can see disks that are running, potentially running hot. But then I can also see what's happening in terms of patch compliance, right? So I can see that I'm missing certain updates. And if I click on any of these, this is the other cool part with workbooks and whatnot, like, I can drill directly into the resource to the point where I can take action on these things from that single pane of glass. So it's a pretty powerful capability. A lot of neat offerings being generated by virtue of onboarding onto Azure Arc and applying policy to deploy those agents at scale across your environment to give you a better and more comprehensive view of your entire environment from a monitoring metric and patching perspective. I have reached the end of my demo.
Yeah, and I think you had kind of touched on it in passing throughout the demo there, but we were certainly focused on Windows machines. But as you saw through in the dynamic scopes, et cetera, Update Manager does fully support Linux distributions as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, I think
Yeah.
I can hand this over to Kelly and we can figure out next steps here.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Fantastic. I always love getting into the tool and getting to see it live. And that was awesome. So I did want to circle back. I know we talked about this for those that attended last Friday, but I did want to touch on it again. Our team is here to help you get started. So if you want to take some of the things that Adam and Mark were discussing today and enable it in your environment or do a proof of concept, please reach out. We've got a forum here. I'll drop it in the Q&A as well. Happy to help get you started doing either a proof of concept, or we also have a free of charge, zero cost offering with our cloud migration factory to actually deploy this in your environment as well. So depending on what you want to do for next steps, we're here to help. So just let us know, reach out, and we're ready to get started. And then Adam, if you go to the next slide, I did want to just do a quick call out for the upcoming sessions that we have remaining as part of the series. This Thursday, we're going to be looking at more of the security aspects. I know there were a couple questions in the chat that lended itself towards more of security focus. So highly recommend you all attend this Thursday. And then next week on Tuesday, we're going to go deeper on SQL-specific scenarios when it comes to Arc enablement. So if you haven't already registered, register for these upcoming sessions, and we look forward to seeing you this Thursday. So with that, I think there's a couple more questions for within in the chat. Feel free to use this time to throw any additional questions that you have out there, and we will do our best to answer them. And with that, I'm going to actually go ahead and conclude the recording of this session, and we can just leverage it for the remainder of the time for Q&A.
Sounds great. Thanks, Kelly. I'm going to leave this Q&A